Okay.
All right, welcome to Freedom's Light Church. We're glad to have you with us. And last week we began a study called Laying a Foundation. And I decided to do that based on a film we watched several Wednesday nights ago about sin. And the feedback was so good, I just thought, you know what, we need to make sure we've got the proper foundation laid. And so we talked about, last week we talked about eternal life and being saved from what and what that really means. So I won't go back over that, but if you want to check into that from last week, you can. All right, so this week we're going to talk about salvation by grace and what that really means. So have you ever been confronted by anyone who doesn't believe that salvation is by grace? So this has been a real controversy in the Christian church, and as grace preachers and the grace revolution and the grace this and the grace that has come through the church. And if you've been a Christian very long, you see all these, and I can't think of anything other than to say that are fads, but they're not all fads, they're not all bad. But we have these things that sweep through the church. Well, right now it's the grace revolution, okay, which is not bad at all, it's fantastic. But you've got the staunch, legalistic, old timers who fight grace because they think it's more about works, okay? And so you may talk to people about grace, and they may talk bad about grace, and I've heard people call it greasy grace. And and I have talked to people that just, they don't believe it, they don't want to hear it, and so there's not much you can do with that. But we all need to have a good understanding of what grace is and what it isn't. Okay, because with any fad will come what isn't. Okay, so you got to watch for the truth mingled in with the untruths. So I think the very best example in the Bible of grace is the absolute awesome story of the prodigal son. And Jesus told this awesome story, and what a story it is. And when I started really thinking about this and studying this, I got excited. Because it is just a phenomenal story, and we're going to go through it. And I think it's a story that we need to read occasionally and really meditate on and think about the story and think about what Jesus was trying to tell us in this story. But first, let's look at what grace is and what it means. So in the Greek, the word used for grace is charis, C-H-A-R-I-S. So charis means, this is what the Greek word charis means. It means the free, unmerited favor of God towards people who don't deserve it. The free, unmerited favor of God towards people who don't deserve it. So right there, if you understand the Greek meaning of the word grace, and in Greek it's charis, and you understand the definition and you've comprehended that it's the free, unmerited favor of God towards people who don't deserve it, how in the world can you apply a title to that such as greasy grace? You can't. So that just shows you people that down grace are people who just don't understand. So now let's think about the prodigal son, who took his inheritance early before his father even died. Now that's amazing to me that his dad would even give it to him. Okay, and he took his inheritance and he wasted it all, every single last cent of it. He wasted it all on partying and women. And that's what Jesus said. He lost every last cent of that money. He didn't even have the decency to call or even text his father the entire time he was gone. I mean, this guy was a scoundrel. He didn't work. He was rebellious. He was low down. He was a scum bucket of scum. I mean, really, he was. And everything his father had worked his entire life for and gave it to this deadbeat son. His son wasted it and blew it. And honestly, he deserved to live homeless under a bridge somewhere. But God. But God. So what did the father do? Well, he didn't know if his son was dead or alive, because his son hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't written, nothing. And so the father didn't have a clue what was going on. But every day the father hoped. And every day he longed to see his son again. And every day he would look out at the end of the road hoping that today would be the day. And maybe, just maybe, his son had escaped death and he would come home. Because you see, the father knew how bad it was out there. The father knew all the dangers. And then, yeah, it was dangerous. Just think about going to New York City in the worst, possible area you could walk in at night. I mean, there are real dangers out there. And there are people who do not care about you, and they will do horrible things to you and kill you. So his father knew all this. And so that's why his father didn't know and thought maybe he was dead, but he just longed at watching the road every day to see if his son might come home today. So when the son did come home, the father, I love this, the father recognized his gait, recognized the way he walked from afar off, and he was so excited. Now, how many of you mothers recognize your child's walk? You could just tell from a long ways off, just how they walk, or just their silhouette, or whatever. You just know your child, and so that's how this father was. And think about this. See, he saw him from a far distance, Jesus said. And so the father recognized his gait. At this point, he couldn't see the condition that his son was in. All he saw was from a distance his gait. And he was so excited, he couldn't believe it. He was ecstatic that today his son came home and he was alive. And so the father ran to the house and called his servants and said, "Get ready, get ready. My son has come home." He was so excited. And the son walks up, and he looked like he had been on meth. He was starved. He was dirty. He was stinky. He was skinny. He was haggard. He was tired. And he was poor. He was broke. He didn't have one dime left. And the father could clearly see that life in this sinful world had not dealt a good hand to the son. But you know what the father did? He had compassion on him. And the father never thought about the money that he wasted. All he thought about was that his son was lost and he had come home. All he could think about was how happy. And no matter the condition that his son came back to him in, all he could think about was that his son was home. And he wasn't dead, but that he was alive. And he had a second chance. People, this is grace. The free, unmerited favor of God towards people who don't deserve it. That is the picture of grace. And this is how God views us. So how do I know? Well, because this is a made-up fictional story that Jesus told. It was a parable. This was all made up. And Jesus told this story out of his own mouth to illustrate the relationship between us and God. I mean, I can't even, there's no way, I mean, obviously, but I can't even imagine any other Bible story that I know that could more adequately illustrate the relationship between us and God than the prodigal son story. And God sees us in reality the way we really are. My computer keeps like jumping. So hang on a second. All right, so God sees us before salvation the way we really are. We're dirty, we're stinky, we're skinny, we're haggard, we're tired, we're poor, we're lost in sin. We're beat up by the enemy. We're separated from God in the most insidious way. And I do think that He pities us. And I do believe that He longs for us, that He just waits for our unification with Him. And daily, I think He's standing, waiting, watching, just like the Father in the story was watching out at the road, waiting, longing to see if we were going to come, desiring so badly to fellowship with us. And I think that one fact will change lives if you can ever get a hold of that. And there is nothing greasy about this grace that Jesus told us in the story of the prodigal son, because Jesus is grace. And we were talking last night because evidently the House, right, Jeff? The House passed something.
The Equality Act is going to make it illegal for us to talk and preach against anything like homosexuality, LGBT, all that.
So
It's
now
not a law yet, but
It will be.
yeah. So now it's going to the Senate.
I already said that 4 years ago.
But what we were talking about was that truly, now I'm 57, all right? So in my lifetime, I've never seen it this bad.
right.
And I don't mean the morality of the nation so much as what I'm talking about is I've never seen people so cold, so dry, so close to the gospel. Now, I'm not out there really in the public anymore, and witnessing and evangelizing is not really my thing anyway, okay? But now somebody like James and Jeff that talks to everybody, you know, they're just big talkers and they don't have a problem with that. Y'all hear, you know, James and what every week he's telling somebody about the Lord. Like Jeff said, he's only led one person to the Lord. Nobody wants to hear it. You know, when I was a kid, I mean, it was a big thing. Every family went to church. I mean, if you didn't go to church, you were pretty low down. Okay, I mean, you were on the wrong side of the tracks because every decent family went to church. Now, you might not have been saved, but you went to church. Okay, and so what I'm saying is, I've never seen our nation to the point that people literally don't care about God in any way, shape, or form. They just don't want anything to do with Him. And so I believe that we are truly in the great falling away. And I think this COVID has further amplified that, because it is going to be very difficult for people to get back in the habit of going to church. Once you get out of the habit, it's really hard to get started to go back. And especially if you're not even saved and you don't love the Lord. But what I'm saying is, see, if people really understood this grace and they understood what, I mean, in context of the prodigal son and coming home, what that really means, oh my gosh, you'd be running there. You'd be running there with everything in your power. And this is what draws people, is the love that draws us to Him. And so, now let me ask you this. Did the son stop on the way to his father's house? Remember, he left the pig farmer. He was starving to death. He was eating what the pigs were eating. Did he stop on his way to the father's house to get cleaned up and to look more presentable? And did he go by the barber shop? Did he perhaps stop by the tailor and picked up a new robe and sandals so that he can make a better presentation to his father? Is that what the Bible says he did? No, he didn't have a penny to his name. He couldn't have stopped by the barber if he wanted to. He had to go just like he was, dirty and stinky and hair all grown out and probably had a big beard. No, he was starving to death. He had no money. He was a mess in every sense of the word. Why do we think that we have to clean ourselves up before we come to God? See, that's not biblical. And Jeff and I said this morning, a song came on, I can't remember, I think the name of it was He Accepts You the Way You Are. And Jeff said, look at the name of that, look at the title of that song. See, and that was the name of
Yeah,
the song.
something like, He loves you as you are.
He loves you as you are. Well, there is some truth in that. He does love you the way you are, but He is not going to accept you because He can't.
Well, He doesn't even love you. Think about it. A holy God cannot have any type of fellowship the way we are. He loves us in spite of what we are because that is His love, and therefore grace demands mercy be given. And the whole thing, and I used to say this years ago, and God accepts you as you are, but when you really stop thinking about that, that's a lie. He calls us as we are because we're broken sinners, but He only accepts us through the righteousness of His Son, and that only happens when we're born again. It's amazing. Okay, I'm going to my office.
Okay, all right, thank you. So, now that we understand what grace really is, all right, so we understand what grace is, now let's look at what it's not, all right? So, back to the prodigal son. So, the boy came home after literally being beat up by the sin of the world. And while he had been feeding the pigs for this farmer and starving himself, he let his mind drift back to his childhood and back to his teenage years. Thoughts of his father wafted through his mind. And then he thought of the servants that served his father. And he thought about how his servants loved his father. And how good he was to them. And how even though not of the family, his father treated them with kindness and cared for them, making sure that they were fed and clothed and housed properly. He thought about the abuse that he was suffering then, and he wondered, why, oh why, did I ever want to leave such a grand place as my father's house? Now, in a modern day scenario, my grandparents had a maid since she was 15, that came to work for them when she was 15. She took care of my dad. She took care of me and my brother and sister. When my mother didn't work, but, I'd go stay with Abby. Her name was Abby. I'd go stay with Abby at my grandmother's house. And she was a black lady, and she was never married. And then when my sister had kids, she took care of her 3 kids. And she died at 103. My dad bought her a house. My dad gave her a car. My brother taught her to drive. She was part of our family. And she came to, all our family functions. And so in a modern day sense, she was like this servant, a paid servant, but she was part of the family. We loved her, And at her funeral, I'm the one who, spoke at her funeral. And so I know exactly what they're talking about. Now back then, my grandmother, obviously, that was a whole different era, and I'm sure my grandmother didn't love her like we did. But, she was a part of our family, all of us kids, and so we all loved her. And my sister named her daughter after her. Her name's Abby. and so I can definitely relate to this servant type thing. Another way you could relate to this is if you've ever been in the military or even with a president. I had a great fondness for Ronald Reagan. That's when I was in the Navy during the Reagan years, and his boyhood home is in Dixon, Illinois, where Jeff's from. And so I've been there, 100 times, and every time, and I mean every time we go in that house, I cry. Every time I go in there, I say, I'm not going to cry this time, and every time I cry. And now, was he, perfect? Was he a perfect president? No, but he was the best we had until that point, I think. And then I had that connection from being in the Navy. And then, or you could do that with an employer. Maybe you've had an employer who just really elevated your life and just gave you a start and gave you a chance, and you've got that respectful, love of leadership. That's what that is. And so there's some way you can, relate to that. But this is when he decided to go home. was when he ruminated on this stuff and when he really got to thinking about it. See, when he was at home, all he was thinking about was getting away. And then when he got away, all he was thinking about was going back home. And so he had his plan. He had developed a plan, what he would say, how he's going to go home, how he's going to, what he's going to say to his father. I bet he had it all figured out, even to the point of maybe falling at his father's feet, and begging for mercy. He knows he's done wrong. He realizes the shape he's in, so he's got this all planned out. What he was going to say, how he was going to beg, how he was going to plead for forgiveness, how he was going to be on his best behavior, how he would be so happy to simply live as a servant and serve his father and his family humbly. Because that's what he thought was his fate, and the only thing that he could do was to maybe go back to his father's house and work as a servant. But we know that's not what the father had his beloved son do. And now, do you think that the son went back home and he stayed living the righteous or the riotous living that he was living? Do you think? So we know he didn't clean up before he came home. All right, he came home all nasty and dirty and poor and broken and poverty-ridden. Now, do you think he came home and continued in his riotous living, living in sin? Do you think he did that? No, because why? He was so grateful, so in awe of his father's love and forgiveness. He was so moved by his father's compassion. He was so ashamed, but yet so grateful that he stayed in his father's house and he tried his hardest to prove himself to himself and to his father. See, this is righteousness by grace. Because when somebody loves you that much, you find that your desires change, your wants change, your thinkings change. Everything changes when you realize how much he loves you. And then you find that you don't even want to sin. You just don't want to. So it's where you realize where you were and what Jesus has done for you. And then you are so thankful, so grateful that you want to live right. And you don't want to bring shame on your father again. And you don't want to do bad. And you don't want to feel that way ever again. So you see, the son could do nothing to get his father to take him back. And the father had every reason not to. Tell you what, if I gave you my inheritance that I've worked all my life for, and I give it to you early, and you go squander it, and you spend every last dime of it, and you don't have a thing left. Now me, I don't know if I'm going to be so merciful when you come begging and crawling back. Okay, that's going to be a little hard for me. But see, we're talking about God here. And so the son knew he didn't deserve to even be a servant to his father. And that's what the gospel is. It's good news that he loves us and he wants us back. And let me ask Pastor, what are you looking for? And I'll tell you where it is.
My phone.
Oh, I don't know. It's in one of those bags. Okay, so Titus 3:5 says, not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to the mercy he saves us, by the washing of regeneration and renewing of the Holy Spirit. Well, that pretty well does it right there, right? He didn't clean himself up, because you can't. Because works of righteousness is not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy. So let's say he did clean himself up. Why don't you just take my purse in the office?
It's not in here.
Okay, well then look in the other bag.
I'm being quiet. Nobody knows I'm here except you announce it.
Oh, you're making noise, which will pick up on the internet. All right, so again, Titus 3:5, not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy he saves us by the washing of regeneration and renewing of the Holy Spirit. I'm telling you what, for anybody who thinks, if anybody ever tells you that, well, I gotta, I'll try to do better and then I'll give my life to the Lord, then you just tell them that right there. Titus 3:5. So I was listening to Faith in History, and it was on Hawaii, and it was how the first missionary to Hawaii, interestingly enough, was a black woman. And because of her influence on the Queen, and I can't pronounce this, it's real common in Hawaii, but looking at the word, I can't remember how to say it, because it doesn't look like, it's not spelled the way you say it. But anyway, Queen somebody. Because of her influence on this queen, she outlawed drunkenness and prostitution in Hawaii. Well, as you can imagine, this highly upset the sailors that would come port in Hawaii. And so they didn't want anything to do with God or religion. And they preferred their pagan religion the Hawaiians practiced before this. Now, I can understand this, right? All right, so when I heard this, it reminded me of today and the attitude that many think about God, and that is that He is some kind of ogre, all right, and He's waiting just to see how clean, how much better you can make yourself, how much you can overcome, and how you can conquer in life before coming to Him. That's what we think. And that's what everybody thinks. And I know that's what all these young men that James talks to, I know that's what they think. All right, and you see, this is why Jesus told the story of the prodigal son. And because this is a story and an example of grace. And tell me where the greasiness is in that. Again, the son had no food, no money, no way of making himself more presentable. He had nothing. He was nothing. And unless you call bankrupt and pathetic something, he was nothing. And he was a total and complete mess. And in truth, death was knocking on his door through starvation. And the world was not the exciting place that he thought it was. All those daydreams he had of getting out in the world, it turned out to be not true. And it was not the place of fun and paradise that he had dreamed of and he had visioned. And he thought getting away from his father was where the fun would be. How many of us have thought that? Exactly. So this probably sounds very familiar to every single one of us. So either we think that God is a drag and He's keeping us from our fun, which is what most young people think, or we think that He requires us to clean up, march right, and toe the line before He will accept us. So where do you see either scenario in the prodigal son? You don't. Because Jesus spoke this out of His own mouth, and neither scenario is there. So, because grace is not greasy, what it is merciful and beautiful. So just imagine yourself broken and homeless, and as far beaten down as life could beat you, and you go home to your Father, and thinking you're going to have to fall at His feet and beg, but instead, He embraces you with open arms, and He loves and restores you, and He fills your empty belly. Where in that scenario do you see anything that is unfair or not right? Where do you see the poor wretch of a son cleaning up, making all the money back that he lost in order to pay his father back? That would have been impossible. No, the money was a gift, and the son did not owe the money back. That is huge. The father didn't say, now you go out and work and you make all that money back and pay me back. Now that's what we would do, but that's not what the father did. The father forgave him. The father would have been very disappointed, I'm sure, that the money was wasted, but it was still a gift. And you can do whatever you want to with a gift. So in truth, the son had no way of repaying the money. And in truth, had he not gone home, his father would never have heard of him again. and because he would have died. And to think that God requires us to clean up first before we come to him is a preposterous idea. And it's straight out of the pits of hell. So apart from him, see, apart from him, we are dirty, stinky, pathetic, broken creatures, and we don't even resemble how he created us to be. We are lost apart from him. And just like those sailors making port in Hawaii, riotous living, or desiring a riotous life, see, that was just who they were. They were sinners. And so the idea of God and not being able to go to prostitutes and not being able to drink and stuff, well, that wasn't very appealing to them. Little did they know that in the Father's house is all the good things that they were missing out on, and that they could come just as they were and not having to work one iota to clean themselves up prior to coming. See, they could come like they were. They could come dirty, broken, riotous, but as long as they came in sincerity, then God the Father would rejoice over them. And then guess what he would do? He would set them up as leaders in his home. He would clothe and provide for them, teach them, and take away their bad desires that were not good for them. And in turn, they would love and appreciate him, and their desires would change. And if they want to be the sons their Father God wants them to be, he will make them into that person. I'm telling you what, this is why the gospel is called the good news. Because it's a fantastic deal. And it's the best deal that has ever been offered to mankind. It's incredible. It's a life-changing event if you will only allow it. And then notice how, my final point on that is notice how that God, he put the robe around him. He didn't make him a servant. He restored him to sonship. He restored his his position in the family. He didn't say, okay, well now I'll let you work my fields and feed my animals and all that, and you be a servant. No, he didn't do that. He put the robe around, and he had a big party that his son had come home, and he restored him to sonship. He restored him to what he should have been in the first place. I hope I'm portraying this in a way that y'all can really get a hold of it, because this is what Jesus does for us. And if you've lived any length of time and you've gone out in the world, you see it ain't what it's cracked up to be. and it's getting more so by the day. And there's nobody out there that cares one hoot about you. So we long for things in the flesh that are just ridiculous, that are just harmful, that'll destroy us. But God says, no, stay with me, come with me. I'll make you leaders among men. I'll bless you. I'll give you a position in my home. I'll give you a prominent position in my home. And so it's just such a phenomenal story showing us what the true meaning of grace is. Now, I'm anxious to hear anybody who has anything you want to comment on this. Maybe what this means to you before we move on to our next topic. Come on, Barbara.
Well, I think with grace, we have been, I think the older people were afraid of it because of where we've let it go.
Yes.
You know, because we have let it go to greasy grace. You know, we let people believe that grace is not what you just defined it. That grace is, I can live however I want.
That's right.
Because God is graceful and merciful, and he doesn't demand anything of me. You know, as long as I accept him or be baptized.
Let's add a little common sense to that. Okay, if your kid, gets on drugs and becomes a derelict and won't work, and okay, yeah, do you love them? Of course you do. All right, but are you gonna accept them? Are you gonna provide for them? Are you gonna, exalt them as your child when they're out there doing all that? No!
Yeah.
That defies common sense. So why in the world would God, after you come to Him and you still live, horribly, why in the world do you think that He just accepts that and loves you like that? I mean, yeah, He loves you, but He's not gonna accept all that sin. So the whole point is that you come and He puts the robe on you. He gives you the position. He gives you all it comes down to is surrender. So Lord, you know what? My flesh desires to drink. My flesh desires to smoke pot. My flesh desires to sleep with women. My flesh desires to sleep with men. Whatever my flesh desires, but Lord, I surrender it to you.
And it will get easier.
It does.
It will get easier. I know when I was smoking, it did get easier.
Mm-hmm.
And He took that desire away, from me.
Amen.
But I was not good about it,
All we have to do is be willing.
I kept praying about it, kept saying, I don't want to do this, and, but the desire was more, and the addiction was more,
And the closer you get to Him, I can't explain it. I don't know how it works, but I'm just telling you, the closer you get to Him, He begins to deal with all that, and you'll just wake up one day and you're like, wow, I don't desire all those things that I used to desire.
And you have the strength to stay away from it too. It's like, I could go back in a minute, like I saw people smoking on vacation. It was like, gosh, I would love to have a cigarette. I would love to have a cigarette, but then it went away as soon as.
And then if you had one, you'd probably go, eh.
And I would, and I know how hard it was for me to stop, and I said, nope, and then He gave me the strength to say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And that's just one thing in our life.
Exactly. It's a hard thing. You just got to come to a point of surrender. You know what? I just want whatever you want, Lord. I just want whatever you want for my life is what I want for my life, and whatever you want me to do. That's all it is. Just be willing to say, Lord, whatever. You just do the work, because I can't do it.
Right.
I absolutely cannot do it. And if people would get that, then oh my gosh, their lives would just be so much better. Anybody else have any comment? We got about 10 minutes.
Well, I'll say the other thing I
Okay.
remember is when I was a young person, I remember somebody approaching me about coming to church, and I said, well, as soon as I become a better person,
Yeah.
I'll come.
Bingo.
And then, really, we should set people straight. We should
Yes.
know the truth.
Yes.
Because they should have said to me, you'll never do it.
Exactly.
But see, we were in such of the
Works.
tradition and works. We've just mixed it up so much. Like Paul was warning us not to do
Yes.
this, and here we are, right? And even about the greasy grace, he said,
Yes.
no, God forbid that you would go stay in your sin.
Right.
Right? He said, no. He said he's giving you grace, but God forbid. He said, so we can just go do what we want. And Paul said, no, you can't do
That's
what you
right.
want. And it's the same way with works, but we mixed it up so bad that none of us really know the truth, that we were just like surrender. We just were set free from all of it.
That's
Like
right.
he took all the burdens that we've just put on our own back in that backpack.
That's right.
And we just carry them around trying to do better, be better, when he just says, just give it to me.
Exactly.
Just like the Father.
Exactly.
Right? Just bring all your trash right here and I'll take care of it all. And I'll even restore you. Now, what better deal is that?
Man, there isn't one.
No. And I think the better we live and show other people what's in our heart, then other people see that and it encourages them. Like I think about my family who's not saved, maybe by the way that my life has changed and the way
Yes.
that they see my life.
That's right, they will.
And
They may not tell you, but they see it.
that is so true, and I think that's why people don't accept Christ, because the world looks at us and says, you're so broken, you can't, you're depressed. A lot of people in the church are on drugs, there's depression, there's suicide, the marriages aren't working, and when they see that, they like, what do you have to offer me? And the problem is, we've been trying to overcome that ourselves. We've been trying to fix our marriage and fix ourselves, and when God just wants us to lay it down and let Him fix it, and then it'll bring Him glory.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So then they'll look at us and go, wow, well, there's something different. But it's not because we've done the work, it's because we've surrendered.
Now let me give you my own real life example of this. I just think I had the sweetest father that's ever been. And he just had that personality. He was just a very kind man. At his funeral, there were a couple hundred people there. And everybody came up to me. All these men came up to me, and they all said basically the same thing. And they called him their best friend. And I thought, it was so strange to hear all these men think of him as his best friend. And he really didn't have a best friend. You know what I mean? And so all these men just highly respected him and just thought of him as such a close friend. And that meant a lot to me. But he just had that personality, and he was just such an awesome person. And we all just, almost worshiped him. We loved him. But when I got to my teenage years, I still did what sinners do, right? And I still looked for, companionship, self-worth, looking for a guy to make me feel worthy, look for a guy to make me feel better about myself. We all go through that. And so then, so in turn, I hurt my dad, okay? Because I did things I should not have done, okay? And literally, I was at country music song looking for love in all the wrong places because I didn't look to, nice, decent guys. I went for the, horrible ones. And so, then I joined the Navy, and then, Party City. I mean, that's all you do is work and party, right? And unless there was a war going on, which there wasn't, so all we did was party. And so anyway, but now I got saved in the 8th grade. But that was pretty much the end of it because I was never really discipled after that. Okay, so I had this internal struggle going on my entire early life. Okay, I knew what was right and wrong, but even though I was a Christian, I was still doing wrong. Why? Because my mind hadn't been renewed. Now, my spirit was always calling to me, no, you shouldn't do that, no, this is wrong. And every time I'd get serious with a guy, then the first thing I do is turn it all around and we can't do this, we can't do that, and we need to go to church. All right, so that shows you that I was saved, and my spirit was wanting to do right, but my flesh did everything wrong because that's all I knew to do. You know what I mean? I didn't have enough knowledge. Nobody had really discipled me and poured into me. And my parents, were good people, but they didn't know. And so then after I really got on a better track, I met Jeff. He was really serious about the Lord. And after, I really got on a better track and stuff, then guess what? Then guilt just came on me like a tidal wave. And guilt about my dad, because I knew how much he loved me, and I knew that I had let him down, and I knew that I was a disappointment to him, and that really weighed on me really badly. And so then I was always trying to prove myself to my dad, that I wasn't, that deadbeat prodigal, that I had changed, that I was better, that I was always trying to make him proud of me, and always, just always wanted still. I mean, even as an adult, I knew he loved me, but I just craved that love from him, just that reassurance, that he loved me, and so I can, but now at the same time, I always knew he was there for me. Always. I mean, I knew no matter what happened to me, no matter what I did, I knew he would be there. I knew he would bail me out. I knew that, I just knew that he would never turn me away. And for those of you that didn't have that kind of father, you know what? I'm sure you can think of somebody in your life that has been there for you, your mother or a grandmother or somebody that's been there for you that you can relate to with the Father. But that's to me, my father was the closest thing that I've ever experienced to the Father in that story. And I was the prodigal son. I was the prodigal daughter. And when he died, I was just crushed. I mean, I was just literally crushed. It took me a while to come to terms with it because I was crushed. But I know I'll see him again.
Right.
So it's 9:45. Anybody else got any comments before we wrap it up? All right, well, next week we'll pick it up again. We're laying a foundation. So if your foundation's not laid, then your house is going to be like this. And then guess what? Then when trouble comes, it's going to all fall apart. So we've got to make sure that we've got the foundation laid, and that's what we've been doing starting last week, and we'll be on this for a couple more weeks, making sure our foundation's laid, making sure we understand. And one last comment I'll say about the works versus grace. The reason I think we get that all mixed up is because we mix up the old covenant with the new covenant. Okay? And until you get it in your head that this is the old covenant and it has passed away, and this is the new covenant, and this is where I'm supposed to go and go forward. I'm losing my balance. So if you don't understand that, then you'll mix them all up, and then you'll try to live by the old covenant, but yet you're trying to live by the new covenant, and they don't mix. They're oil and water. They will not go together. So the old covenant was there for us to learn from and to show us why Jesus had to come. But now we say, okay, now I can learn from all this over here, but this is not how I'm supposed to live. I'm just supposed to learn from it and find Jesus in it over here. And then this is how I'm supposed to live, because this is the new covenant, and this is what Jesus did for me. And so when you get that distinction, then life starts getting a whole lot better. And then you can lay down that backpack of condemnation and guilt and all that, and then you'll have a renewed mind and better understanding to go forward. All right, so next week we'll pick up with relationship with God. So now that we understand what eternity is, we understand what He saved us from, and we understand grace, what it is and what it isn't. So next week we'll talk about, now that we got all that down, now how can we have a relationship with God? And we'll pick up there next week. All right, join us upstairs for praise and worship at 11:15, and a great message from Pastor Jeff, and then the soup cook-off.